So my name's Peter Rotich. I was born and raised in Kenya, specifically Kapsabet area, Kamobo. I grew up there and I ended up coming to college at Tulane. So I grew up in kind of a rural environment. So I grew up in a village. So having an idea of what was going on outside that ecosystem was difficult, or rather, we weren't aware a lot about what's beyond our village setting. So I grew up in a very rural area, no running water, no electricity. We worked hard, but the humility part of it came with that. And I went to a local primary school and ended up at Samoa High School.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk about your primary school a little bit, because I always find primary school to be really interesting, both in terms of just childhood experiences, but also sports. What was the name of the primary school that you went to?
Yeah, it's called Simteret Primary School. Yes,
okay.
And it's a local primary school. Basically we walked to school back and forth from nursery school to third grade. You don't go back to school because you have to come home for lunch. So that was kind of the setup.
Right.
It was quite small school compared, so we didn't have a whole lot of sports. And of course, track and field was inter classes and also inter schools level competition we had.
So you did have so you had like what we call physical education, or PE,
yes,
sports kind of period games, right?
Yes, definitely. We had PE, and the main thing I remember was soccer. I played soccer a little bit when I was younger, and I got kicked once, and that was the end for me. And I think that's really what got me into running. I felt like it was kind of individual sports, not a contact sport.
And so, but you also, in terms of, so you had games and PE, but then you said for primary school there were some interschool, like interscholastic competitions.
Yeah, absolutely. That's kind of a typical, during track seasons we'll have those. Either at the sub-location level or even at the district level. But I wasn't like into running back in the day. And it wasn't even like a training thing because we didn't have training gear. So basically what we would do is we're running barefoot and we just wait until the competition season comes around, and then you start training for a couple of weeks. And so it wasn't a very structured training.
Right.
Yeah.
But there was a team.
Yes, there's a team. Basically, they'll pick like inter classes, and then they'll pick a couple of people to represent the school.
Right.
Yeah.
Would there, speaking with other people in the past, it also seems that like the PE classes, the PE games, is also where the school teams are chosen from. Is that how it works?
Yeah, I mean, the teachers will recognize the talent if it's there during the PE, right? You can see somebody that likes running, or they have the talent for it. So from that, you get encouragement to compete inter classes and be able to be picked to represent the school.
Is that so it's primary school where you kind of started doing competitive sports then?
Yeah, I started then, but I didn't take it seriously.
Right.
I felt I was more like a studious kind of person than a runner. And so I didn't take it seriously until high school.
So can you let's talk about that a little bit. And I know you mentioned in our previous conversation, and from what I read in the article you sent me, school and studies seems to have loomed large for you from an early age, right?
Yes.
And obviously this has implications for high school and then college. But when did that in your life start to be something that you saw as really important for you?
I think I had the aptitude for being an engineer. I always took apart things like, I wanted to know, for example, I remember my earliest memory was trying to figure out how the voice got into a radio. So I had this curiosity since I was a kid, because we had nothing else to do, no TV, nothing else. So the only thing you'd struggle with was trying to figure out how to occupy your mind. And for me, engineering kind of thing was a thing I liked. So I read a lot, and I have older sisters, like 5 of them ahead of me. It's a big family where I have 8 siblings, 1 brother and 6 sisters. And so I would take their books and start just reading and trying to understand ahead of my class. My dad also was very involved with the school systems there. I was one of the co-founding chairman for the local primary school.
Okay.
So he instilled in me the idea of school was important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's something that many people tell me too as parents. Parents are oftentimes important in, especially in kind of like establishing that idea that school is valuable. What about with sports? How interested were your parents in you participating in sports?
Not really. Surprisingly, actually, I think that after high school, they were kind of shocked. Actually, I was kind of interested in running. To them, they felt like, okay, you go to university, get your education, get a job, that kind of situation. So they never really looked at athletics as a gateway to even get the education. So.
Did they ever see athletics or sports in general as maybe a distraction from school, or ever kind of discourage you?
Yeah, not necessarily discouraged, but I remember a couple of times if you asked for, I remember when I was younger, I would ask for like shoes, for example, running shoes, and it felt like, that was not a thing to be spend money on, right? So that wasn't really something they encouraged, to be honest. Yeah.
So you started taking part in competitive running in primary school. Are there any memories or kind of experiences from those interscholastic competitions? Even though you according to what you said before, it wasn't necessarily you were taking it seriously. You were just doing it. Was there anything in those competitions that you look back on as a moment of success, or something that you enjoyed doing, or that you remember from that kind of early part of your running career?
Yeah, so I think in primary school, as thinking back on it, it felt easy. It wasn't as hard as although we weren't training, getting ready for the competition. Even when the interclasses came, we trained for a week, and it felt like I could get in shape easily. That's the memory I remember thinking back.
Yeah, interesting. What about I guess maybe this might lead into your high school stuff. So let's go to secondary school. And in Kenya, there's these tests that you have to take for, I guess it's your CPE is
Kenya primary.
the exam. So how did you end up choosing the high school you went to? How did that happen, your transition?
Yeah, so for me, it wasn't really a choice. It wasn't one of those things as a choice. It's just like what school could accept me. Just remember, like the primary school I went to was not very structured. So the grades was not necessarily competitive in a way. But I got lucky enough to be admitted to Samoa High School.
Samoa.
Yeah.
And are these government schools?
Yes, it was a public school. So I think Samoa at that point was more like a professional school. It wasn't like a national school, and I think it is right now. So admission-wise, I wasn't top in terms of my primary school, and the resources weren't there to really be exposed to good schools.
Yeah. And you had mentioned, this is something I found interesting in our previous discussion, you had talked about how you're a believer in public schools and government schools.
Yes.
Is that because of your experience going to government?
Definitely. I think it's my experience. What really makes me think about this is how many of me are stuck there, right? So if you think about that, we got to find a way of providing scaffolding to these schools, because that's the school that educates the nation, and not everybody will have the ability to send their kids to private school. So I feel like public schools are quite an important infrastructure for kids.
Yeah, and I mean, my experience just in kind of studying education in schools is that, there is a vast difference between the top private schools and then a lot of other schools. There's a massive kind of both in terms of infrastructure, resources, campus, facilities and that kind of stuff. So that's interesting that you talk about that experience as being formative for you. So you went to, was it Samoa?
Yes, Samoa High School, and that's in Nandi Hills. It's still Nandi County, so I'm a Nandi product for sure.
Did you have to board there? Or?
Yes, it was a boarding school, and that was actually my first time being away from my parents. The primary school was local, so I walked to school, walked back home. But Samoa High School was quite of a distance, so it was a boarding school, and that was my first experience being away from home.
How was that experience?
Eye-opener. I think for me, it was the difficulty of just like being away from my parents. Like I said, and I have 8 siblings, so I grew up with like a crowd of siblings and family, and all of a sudden you're out there by yourself. And I don't know if you know much about the Kenyan high schools. It's not that much infrastructure. Cold showers in the morning, all that kind of. And Nandi Hills is kind of really high altitude, so it was really cold for me. Yeah. I remember that being an experience.
Yeah. A lot of people talk about especially students that were in high school in the 60s and 70s that I talked to talk about the shock of going from the valley to going to school in E10, which is, you know,
the
on the
altitude.
escarpment, and the weather. They talk about the weather. So that's interesting. So I guess you must have entered high school in the early 90s then?
Yeah, 92. I remember around 92. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did you go with the intention of playing sports?
No, it was purely school-wise. So Samoa was not really more like E10. It's not really the athletics is not well structured, but we had some good students there. I remember I went to school with Wilfred Bungay. He was a year behind me, so I remember kind of training a little bit with him, and so we had some good runners, but it wasn't like a very structured athletic program.
So not as structured maybe as other schools, but more structured than primary school.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. At that point, I think you have now teachers who are dedicated to PE, they're dedicated to inter-school competition, and school busing students around to go compete.
Right.
So at that point, it's more structured than primary school for sure.
And one of the things I always like to ask is, in those kind of secondary school competitions, inter-school competitions with other schools too, did you guys have any rivals? Like, were there any schools or individual runners where you knew when you competed against that school or those runners it was going to be a contested, hotly contested competition or something that you got excited for?
Yeah, so there were a couple of schools, like, we would compete like Kapsabet boys. There weren't much of runners then, Kapsabet boys. So, but, things like Kemeloi, Lelmokwa boys, those were like really good schools when it came to running, especially 800, 1500 runners. They had pretty good runners, those kind of schools, So anytime you do North Rift or South Rift, competition was absolutely hard, So if you go to North Rift or even South Rift school, making it to professional, it was really competitive.
Yeah, absolutely. And what events did you run in high school?
So I did 1500 and 5,000, 5K, and that was about as much as I did. I tried a little bit of 800, but I wasn't as tall as most of the 800 runners. But I had a little bit of a speed, but not quite enough.
Yeah, the strength though to do the longer distance.
Yes.
Yeah, that's interesting. Can you maybe tell me a little bit about what? So you said training it was more serious in primary school, but maybe not as serious as it was taken at other schools. But can you describe, like, say, what the training was like? How many days a week did you practice? Did you have a dedicated coach, or was it just a teacher at the school? How many kilometers a week did you run? Like, what was it? Obviously, the details might be far in the past, but describe what the training was like in high school.
So it was more like maybe 3 days a week that was like structured, and then part of me like competing in part of this competition was to get away to be able to visit other schools as an outing. So that was actually a privilege in a way. So for me, it wasn't. It felt like, okay, I gotta compete in this intersport so I can be able to go to other schools to visit. So we do like 3 days a week, and we'll do morning run, and then 4 p.m. we'll do, as part of the games, we will do for kind of cool down long run.
And so the competitions, but also training was a way for you to get out into the world almost?
Yeah. Basically, if you think about it, being in high school, the highlight was going to another school. Right. It just felt like, having that freedom of being able to travel to another part of the county to go compete was inter-school games was a big deal.
So I'm curious, how far did you guys travel for competitions? Did you leave the Rift Valley? Did you go to Nairobi? Did you go to Mombasa ever?
No. So for me, I ended up just like, we'll go to Uasin Gishu mostly, and Nandi County. So if you think about that's really the central part of running. So whenever even we had district level, it would be either in Kapsabet or Eldoret.
Yeah. Where was your favorite place to go run in high school?
I think Kapsabet was kind of favored because it's home ground. My parents never really came to see me run, but that was kind of like a thing. At least you would know somebody from the local primary school you went to.
And then that kind of relates to one of my next questions is, parents sometimes are really interested in sports, sometimes they're not. But then friends, like your age mates and your age cohort. How did being an athlete, like how did your friends think about, like, feel about that, think about that? What did that bring to you in terms of, like, did it give you social status? Did it, like, were people like, oh, those runners, you know, are important people, or was it just like, oh, they're a runner, they're part of a team?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I think at the secondary level, nobody's taking you seriously yet. So it's just like, well, it's a sports thing. So I don't remember that being a big deal.
Yeah.
It was a big deal for me, but I don't remember that being a big deal in terms of the community.
Right.
Yeah.
And so one more question about the actual sports in secondary school, and then there's some other things about secondary school and high school I'd like to ask you about. Did you take part in any, I obviously probably took part in like local triangles, inter-school competitions, district competitions. What about provincial and national? Did you ever take part in any of those?
I took part once in professional, but I didn't quite make it to go to national. You know,
So you made it to provincials.
Yeah, but the competition there was quite hard.
Well,
you know?
Rift Valley is, as a region, I mean, is highly competitive.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So,
yes.
What event did you make it to provincial?
1500.
1500.
1500.
That's a competitive event too.
Yeah.
So a couple other things about, like, your high school experience. Was it an all-boys school or was it co-ed?
It was mixed school back in the
co-ed?
day, but nowadays it's some way boys now.
Yeah.
It's a purely boys school right now. Yeah.
And so was there a girls team? A girls athletic track team?
Yes. They had a track team too for girls. Yeah.
How was one of the things in Kenyan sports, especially running, that's been discussed a lot in the last 10 years, 15 years, is the attempt to try to encourage women and girls to take part in sports and at least expand support. Obviously, there's challenges with that and problems that have occurred. But in the 90s, like, what was that when you were in high school? What was the kind of, from your view, the kind of, were there differences between the way the girls team and the boys team was treated, or coaching support?
I don't think it's treatment well. Participation was definitely not there for the girls team, but you could see the boys team was, I guess there was more like encouragement for boys to compete.
Yeah.
So we had some good runners in terms of the girls team, but it wasn't like a big team for sure. I remember being a small team.
Interesting.
Yeah.
One other thing, and not related to sports, that I've heard a lot about at schools that I study is the issue of monetization. Was that there? Have you ever heard of monetization? Is that something that was part of the high school experience for you?
Yes.
You know the term?
Yes. So yes, that was a thing back in 90s. You know, I remember, you know, being a Form 1 student, you had to go through that process. And I guess they call it hazing here.
It's exactly what hazing would be in the US.
That was part of the process. I remember we had to go fetch water for upper class students and stuff like that. Yeah.
A lot of times it's described as, you know, people experiencing, you know, like name calling or making the younger students do chores, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And feel free to go into this in as much detail or not as you want. Sometimes, though, I've heard monetization could get pretty extreme.
Yeah, it didn't get extreme in Samoa.
It wasn't?
It wasn't that extreme, but definitely there was that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So like Form 1s and Form 2, for example, during games you had to go run like 5K in the evenings and stuff like that.
Right.
And I think that was the first time you actually had a sports shoe because part of the uniform situation. So I mean, for me it was enjoyable to go for those runs. It felt like an outing.
That was part of the monetization.
Making Form 1s to go out running.
Oh wow, wow. Yeah. And so that's one of my follow-up. One of the reasons why I wanted to know about monetization is, did it carry over into sports at all? So that's interesting. And then two, as an athlete, did people ever kind of give you less monetization? Were you ever less of a mono?
No. I wasn't really a prominent athlete, so that I remember I was just kind of in the pack. You know, I've never really been that kind of like, you know, top of the pack athlete. Right. So I was just existing within the group.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. So in terms of like your high school experience, when you went to high school, early 90s, I guess you would have been about 13 or 14 if you went in 92, you said.
Yeah.
Was it always your goal to go to university? Was that something that as you entered, you were like, that's what I want to do?
Yeah, I knew I wanted to go to university to study some form of engineering. I didn't know where and how. But the curiosity for me, I remember when the Iraq War was going on around 91, 92, there was talk about Scud missiles, the GPS systems, and as a curious kid, I wanted to know how those things work. So I remember saying, I want to learn how GPS system work. I want to learn how to make computer chips. And actually, my goal initially going to university was to study computer engineering so I could learn how to make computer chips.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Interesting. I also saw in the article you shared with me that you didn't have access to computers in high school very much, right? Or at least
not at all. It was, at that time,
so
absolutely.
That's amazing that without even working with computers, you're thinking about becoming a computer engineer as a high schooler.
So it wasn't really the word computer engineer, but for me it was more like, I remember taking apart watches when I was young, or radio. You can see the transistors, all those kind of the board, and you're wondering how it works.
Right.
And I was always curious to figure out how those works. And when I got an opportunity later, I learned what computer engineering was.
So you didn't even necessarily have that phrase.
I didn't have that phrase. That came into like, okay, I know computers did stuff. And I had the aptitude for engineering. So the combination of those two. Actually, it's kind of funny. The way I chose my major is I went through the list of majors at Tulane, and then I saw computer engineering, and it kind of triggered the two words together. So it wasn't a very intentional thing. And remember, in late 90s, most people didn't really take web seriously. Nobody took computer science seriously.
Beginning of it,
in fact, I had mentors telling me you should study medicine, you should study business. So it was kind of a different thing, but I kind of followed my heart to do that.
That's amazing. And so can you maybe speak, before we get into, because I want to follow up on that part of like, you know, what you studied while you were at Tulane, how you got to that decision and what that experience was like. But to kind of tie up with secondary school and high school, do you remember when you decided or realized or thought about running as being a way to go to university? I mean, is that something that you consciously thought, oh, well, I'm a good runner, therefore I could get a scholarship or go run intercollegiate?
I think in Kenya, a good runner is very relative, right?
It is, no, for sure.
When you talk about good runners in Kenya, you talk about real professional. If you go into a school with somebody like Wilfred Bungay, I don't think you can compare yourself and say you're a good runner. At least for me, I couldn't put myself as a good runner.
You're very humble.
But I remember towards the end of high school, I started thinking, how will I pay for college? And at that time, I started, getting a couple of magazines and seeing about U.S. Universities. So I started thinking about that being a possibility. But initially, it wasn't even a thought. More so after high school, during my time, you used to have a year of a break before you go to university.
After you take your test, right?
Yes. So I graduated in 96. 97, I was just home. I ended up teaching at Kamobo High School.
Oh, okay.
I was good in teaching physics.
I know where Kamobo is. I've seen it,
I was good at teaching physics and math, so I was kind of recruited to teach students there. And the more I kind of talking about it, I met Peter Rotich, who was very influential into me coming to the U.S.
Interesting.
He had been to Mount St. Mary's, winning Olympics '98, Seoul, Korea. So that was somebody from the village, somebody you could talk to, who had actually come here to study. So my late brother-in-law was good friends with him, and he asked me if we could go together. Okay. So we met with him, and I'm just talking and just trying to learn more about United States. And then he just kind of implanted this idea like, look, if you take running seriously, that's an easier way you could get pathway to go get education in the United States.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So that is, and I know you mentioned that in our Zoom conversation, the Peter Rotich connection.
Yeah.
Many of the runners I talk to and people I talk to that end up coming to the U.S. have a person or two that they say, oh, that person was either an inspiration for me or helped kind of like help me realize that this was an opportunity or a possibility. Can you maybe take me through that experience of going to talk to Rono, his role in that, not just in terms of giving you kind of like, oh, wow, the idea that I can do this, but the actual, did he give you advice on like how to apply to schools, which schools to look at, where to look, or was it more just this is an option for you?
No, yeah, I mean, initially, I was going there to think about, okay, I'll get some academic scholarship. I had done really well in high school, so the more I talked about the ability to get athletic scholarship, the more it became more a reality to me. And at that time, he had a camp, and he asked me if I was interested to go try it out in the camp and see if actually that was something I wanted to do. And with him, he was like, look, you can go just put in a month or two, and you have the time now. You're not going to university immediately. So that was like about August 97. So I ended up joining his camp, which was in Kamobo. We trained, and the more we trained, the more it worked out. I remember also doing the SAT. So part of the camping was to prepare for SAT and running. And I did my SAT and I did really well. And Tulane was recruiting. Amos Kiplimo was here already. And I had met up with Nixon Kiprotich, who is the brother of Amos. And so that kind of connection, it's like Tulane is looking for some students. And so I ended up doing my SAT, and that's how the connections came about. But definitely Peter Rotich was the catalyst for sure.
Awesome. No, that's amazing. And it's a great, thank you for taking me through that. Yeah. So Amos Kiplimo was at Tulane.
Yes.
And his brother, you knew through
good friends with Rono. They ran together. Remember they won the Olympics in '98 in Seoul, Korea.
Yeah. No, that's interesting. Rono, side note, went to St. Patrick's.
Yes.
Which is, so his name looms large for me.
Yeah.
So that's interesting that is a connection. And so Tulane recruited you through that connection.
Yes.
Were you interested in going to any other schools, or were there any other options that you?
Yeah, I remember like looking at the whole landscape of the United States and saying I don't want to go somewhere it snows. I remember specifically saying that, and I applied to Rice University and I think Florida State, and just kind of the southern schools, and Tulane so happened to give me a full ride. So
give you a full scholarship.
Yes,
wow.
So I took that opportunity.
Wow.
Yeah.
So one thing that I'm always interested in too is once you got the offer and once you kind of had decided Tulane was a place that you wanted to go, how did you get here? Like, who funded it? How? Because I've heard stories about people having to raise money to buy a plane ticket.
Yeah.
Did the coach come visit you in Kenya first, or was it just via I guess maybe email at that point, or regular mail, or like how did that whole recruitment and then travel work?
Yeah, I remember even sending documents to Tulane via fax machine. Go fax documents. Email was not a thing. You would go to maybe a cyber cave to respond to an email, but mainly it was faxing documents. So the community raised money for me to come here. My dad was able to sell a few things, and then they had, I'm sure you're familiar with Arambe, the collectiveness of the community, and that's something I'm very thankful, and I try to give back, or rather, do a payback for that.
Yeah. So did they have like one big Harambe or a couple of smaller ones to raise money? Or?
So since for me it became quite urgent, I got accepted at Tulane, I think November, and I had to report in kind of an odd in January. So I was kind of actually late coming to school. I think I came here on the 22nd. With the school, I was like a week in or 2 weeks in. So we did just one big Rambe, and I was able to raise enough money, and I think it was like 70,000 Kenyan shillings then to get the flight to come here.
Yeah, because I know, and it's changed since now, but the rules at the time were that the schools couldn't pay for your plane ticket, right?
Yeah, even the NCAA rules now is quite different, right? You couldn't even make any sort of money back in the day.
So I've heard that story many times of, somebody gets an offer, they have a scholarship waiting, but how do I get there? Ultimately. So that's interesting. What were your first thoughts when you got here? Like your first, I assume this is your first time out of Kenya?
Yeah, first time out of Kenya.
First time on an airplane?
First time on an airplane, and it was quite shocking, to be honest with you. I think it's kind of a blur, like that kind of part of like memory, kind of, you don't actually have solid memories of it. I remember landing in New Orleans and a coach picking me up at the airport, and we went all the way to downtown New Orleans and then came through St. Charles. So St. Charles means a lot to me, because that was the first
St. Charles
time.
Avenue, you mean?
St. Charles Avenue. you come into Tulane. And
Yeah.
I remember turning around, looking at the houses and everything else. And it was kind of completely foreign, the culture shock for me. And remember, I was totally a village kid, right? And getting transplanted right away to New Orleans was quite of an experience. One thing I would say though, New Orleans was the best city I could possibly end up in. There's a little bit of welcomingness, homeliness, and that kind of community thing in New Orleans. Strangers will talk to you, and that felt good, to have that kind of community. And also having fellow Kenyans at Tulane was very helpful. Paul Mutai was still at Tulane. Amos was there. Jacob Bushiene. So I remember coming in and being able to at least have that welcome.
Yeah. And that's interesting. That's something that happens at a lot of universities for Kenyan runners at universities that have a Kenyan connection in some way, right? Were there other I want to get into that in a second, but were there any other African athletes or students that you remember like on campus that you were like, that you noticed or met from other countries, or was it just kind of this cool group?
Long distance was mainly Kenyans, but we had a couple of Canadian students, sprinters, and I remember a guy, Clement Abai from Papua New Guinea.
Okay.
Yeah, so we had a couple of foreign students, but in terms of long distance, it was mainly Kenyans.
And do you know, and maybe this is before your time, how did the Tulane, because Tulane has had a connection with Kenyan runners since the 90s, right? Since just before your time. I think the earliest I've seen is like 94. Maybe it was a little bit before that, I'm not sure, but the earliest I've seen is 94. How did that happen at Tulane? Because your era, you have, like you said, you just listed 3 or 4 different people. Salomon Kandie comes, I think, a little after you. So there's clearly like a connection. There's somebody at Tulane that's looking at Kenya to recruit runners. So I'm curious, do you know how that happened?
So I mean, it's kind of one of those things, like once you have a Kenyan there, they will talk to the coach about another Kenyan, right? Yeah, so it's kind of the kind of self-propagating kind of situation.
Yeah.
But I don't think it was like a complete effort, like, we just got to recruit Kenyans. I think just having Kenyans there kind of made it easier for coaches to do recruiting, right? Because if you go into school and you go home visiting, you're going to get maybe 3 or 4 people giving you their time and asking for you to, at least share that with your coach or next school.
Yeah, absolutely. Word of mouth.
Word of mouth kind of situation.
Powerful thing. And did your coaches, the Tulane coaches, did they, what was your relationship and experience with them? You said most of the communication was via fax before you got here. Who picked you up at the airport? Was it a coach that came to the airport?
Coach William Roth. He was assistant. Yeah, he was assistant track and field coach. And cross country coach. So he picked me up from the airport. Yeah, so it was kind of different for me in terms of the running culture here. I had never done like a gym thing, and we had gym sessions after training, I think twice a week.
In the weight room?
In the weight room and all that kind of stuff. So that was completely new to me. I couldn't even lift a bar when I first got here. So that was a different experience, in terms of the equipment and what we needed to do.
Yeah. No, definitely. And then what was the transition to New Orleans specifically? Like, I know in our previous discussion you had said you liked New Orleans. Obviously, it's different at first, and it's a shock probably culturally and socially. But you had said that New Orleans was a good place ultimately for you to be. Yeah. So why was that the case? Why do you think?
I mean, the name Big Easy, right? That kind of rolls into that. I think if you visit other cities, there's nowhere like New Orleans. There's that kind of community thing. A stranger talks to you. There's a little bit of community, and I would say that was a big deal for me. Yeah. And I came from straight like a community setting, and New Orleans was kind of provided that for me.
Yeah. Did you enjoy being in this hot climate, or is that something you had to adjust
that's
to?
really one of the misconceptions people have, right? If you tell somebody you're from Africa, they'll think you're coming from really hot area, right?
Not in Western Kenya.
Yeah, so most of the time, actually, in my phone, I have a weather app just to show people how Kenya, July is like a winter for us, right? It's like 70s all year round, kind of California weather. Right. And so it was shocking how hot it was here, for sure. But I got used to it. I would rather hot than snow.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, you came to the right place then
Yeah.
for that.
Yeah.
So maybe we could talk a little bit about your training and kind of like athletic career at Tulane, and then I'd like to also get into your studies.
Yeah.
What was it like to transition from? Well, you didn't go directly from high school sports, but high school sports, then to this camp that you did at Kamobo with Peter Rotich, then coming to the U.S. to be an NCAA Division I runner. What was that transition from a sports perspective like? Did you find it hard, easy, challenging? What was?
I think it was challenging. Coming and combining schoolwork, and especially myself, I did engineering. Combining that with the rigorous training and also travel. I didn't realize the traveling thing. Every Friday you gotta go out of town, and most teachers don't say, "Okay, you're an athlete. You don't have to submit your homework."
Right.
So that was the balancing act was quite challenging. I remember that being something that I had to get used to. In fact, my first semester was pretty hard, and I was lucky enough that summer came around, and I was able to kind of reset and relax a little bit. I took some summer classes because I came in an odd semester to try to catch up, but summer was really provided the relief for me and to acclimate to the environment.
Yeah, because you came in January, so then you had a semester or summer break. Yeah. And so, in terms of like the competitions and training, did that affect like one of the things that's always a big change when athletes in the U.S. go from high school to college sports is the training is really much more rigorous. You run more days a week, you run more miles, it's more intense.
Yeah.
Did your body have any trouble adjusting? Did you have injuries?
Yes.
Were you tired all the time?
So injuries was a big deal, right?
Yeah.
So you remember, think about Kamobo, we're running on dirt road. It's not concrete,
Right.
Like here. So here we had to be very specific, go to the levee to train to avoid shin splints and stuff like that. So I remember having shin fractures, like air fractures in terms of injuries. So that was something I had to learn quickly that, road racing is not ideal.
Yeah, no, and New Orleans there's not a lot of green space to train in.
Yeah.
We have our parks, but they're not huge, so it's a lot.
And even if you train at Audubon Park, routes is all over the place.
Exactly.
You also risk injury. So I remember that being shocking to me that there wasn't like a really well set up training grounds, compared to Kenya, for example.
Yeah, and then the heat too. Running in the heat is hard.
Yeah, harder, but being below the sea level, it made things a little bit easier. We could train longer, but for sure, I think if you had to train like longer distance, you gotta go very early in the morning.
Yeah, no, for sure. Running in the heat is not fun, nor is it easy. And then, so in terms of competitions, I guess at the time Tulane probably competed against teams in the same region of the country.
Yeah, we were in Conference USA, I think, at that time.
So how far would you usually travel?
Urban, I remember we went all the way to Florida State, Texas. Remember going all the way to South Bend, Indiana for some relay championships indoors. So we did a little bit of travel. Luckily for Tulane, we do a little bit flying to different competitions. Yeah.
What was that experience? You said in Kenya, when you were in school, you liked going to compete at other schools. It was fun seeing these different schools, different places. What was that experience like for you to be able to not only be new to the U.S. and new to New Orleans, but also be able to go to other regions of the country pretty regularly?
Yeah, so that was good. I mean, it's almost like a touring thing for me. So I felt like traveling and then be able to explore and figure out different parts of the country. So I remember, Fridays we get on a bus and it would just be an enjoyable experience to go to the competition. For example, I remember we went to Jackson State University for some cross country, and we had some Kenyans there, so we got to see them, we got to meet. So it was kind of a social gathering sometimes. Yeah. You go to this competition and you'd be like, where are you from? Where are you from? And it became that kind of like camaraderie kind of thing.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's always something. I mean, there are hundreds of Kenyan athletes across the U.S. now. The 90s and early 2000s, maybe a little less, but still a good bit.
A good bit, yeah.
So that's always something people mention. Did you ever make contact, come across, meet anybody who you knew from back home, or was it mostly just, I come from this region?
Yes, the region area. I had a neighbor actually that came and ran for University of Alabama. That's around the time David Kimani was there.
Okay.
I remember competing with David Kimani. He passed.
I know the name.
He ended up passing right after he graduated. But yeah, so I had a friend from the village there, and I had a couple of village mates also ended up coming to the U.S.
Yeah,
after
that's
me.
interesting. Did you stay in touch with those village mates, or?
Yeah, we kept in touch, and so I still keep in touch with some of them. Yeah.
So you came before a few of them.
Yes, I was kind of the early end of it, and in terms of my village thing, I was kind of the first one, and then I had about four more people. Five more people came after me.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So I'm curious about that because you talked about how your connection here was through Peter Rono and then people he knew, and then there was a runner here that his friend knew. His was it Kip Limo's brother. Yeah. What did you play a similar role? Not necessarily in terms of encouraging people to come, maybe, but with those people that came after you, did they ever contact you and ask you like, "What's life like?" And
So I remember one of the kid who ended up coming here. I was like, "What do we need to do?" It was like, get a passport. This is what you need to do, because I remember I had to scramble to get a passport to be able to travel, and so those are the kind of questions that come along. But more so, you become a role model, right? You become somebody who will say, "Hey, he went, right? I could do it too." So if you become an example, I think that's a powerful thing.
Yeah. Everybody I interview, everybody I talk to in my research talks about the importance of a person or a few people who they saw, if they did it, I could do it too. Role models are they always come up.
Yeah.
So what about just other things of transitioning? What did you think about the food? You were talking about the weather. What was... Outside of sports, what was life like in New Orleans?
Oh my gosh, the food was one of those things that I remember thinking, wow, how will I survive long term in terms of ugali was not a thing. But luckily, I talked to the athletic department enough that they were able to allow me to stay off campus. So we all lived together near Ferret Street, I think Simple Street down this near Tulane. Yeah.
Okay.
So we were able to cook, and that was really a saving grace for me. I remember it was really tough to eat the school food. Cafeteria food was, for me, it wasn't cutting it.
Yeah.
But having that ability to live together and cook together was really important.
No, for sure. What did you and your flatmates cook?
I mean, of course, ugali. That was the thing.
You found maize flour here? Or was
we'll go to some stores there. I remember a couple of grocery store had not quite similar, but a kind of Mexican-ish part of it. I know now, people in Ohio, Iowa, they're able to, get real.
You can find it now, but in the 90s and early 2000s, I would think it would be harder.
Yeah, it was harder. But we had something semi-similar.
No, whenever my friends in Kenya, they're always ugali is. I have to have ugali.
Yeah, it's a staple thing, right? It's almost like I remember when you're young, you go somewhere and eat something let's say you have a rice meal and you come home. It's like, did you eat yet? Like, no, I haven't eaten yet because you haven't had ugali.
So that living with the other Kenyan athletes at Tulane must have been a real important kind of support network.
There's no way I would have survived. I remember I kind of had a touch of depression when I landed here, and I remember the support system I had with the teammates was really important because at some point it's like, there's no way I will survive here. I was kind of homesick. I'd never been outside the country, and there's this distance. And I remember calling home was like a minute. Minute was like $2. It was crazy expensive. Cell phone was not a thing, so you had to call somebody's office or telephone booth, so to get your family the next week. I remember having to write letters, physical letters to communicate with family. So it was kind of really difficult. But now, with WhatsApp and everything else, there's real-time communication.
Different now. No. And so, would you mind if I ask, if you have a touch of depression when you come? Was that mostly, obviously, being away, first time in another country? That's totally understandable. First time I traveled abroad, I was very homesick and all those things. Was there anything specific outside of just being homesick that you remember that was hard for you in that kind of initial time?
Yeah, I think the difficulty for me is I had just had a child before I came to the United States. You know, I have a 27-year-old now, and I think that was really the main reasons why.
Yeah.
And also being away from family was difficult. Yeah.
And your family stayed in Kenya?
Yes. Yeah. So my daughter is here now. You know, she ended up going to LSU, and you know, she lives here now. But you know, back in the day, I think she was 6 months old when I started coming here. So that was difficult. Yeah.
Yeah, that's hard. That's hard for
so
sure.
I think that kind of triggered that downturn.
Yeah.
For me.
No, I can understand that.
Yeah.
This might be fast forwarding a little bit, so I don't want to get ahead of ourselves. But when did she then come to the U.S.?
2012.
2012.
Yeah.
Okay.
She. I think second year of high school. She was in Kaparak High School and ended up coming here, going to high school, finishing high school, and then going to college.
Yeah. No, I can imagine. That's I have 3 kids, and they're younger, but 12, 10, and 7. But I couldn't imagine it'd be difficult to travel abroad and stay abroad for an extended period of time when they're young. Yeah.
And you remember, like back in the day, you know, we weren't able to earn money in a way as a student athlete, NCAA rules. So, and then the little stipend you had, you probably send that home to support your family.
Yeah.
So you didn't have the money to fly home and see family. So I ended up staying for 5 years before I went home.
went back.
Yeah, before I went back. So that was after college, after I had a job, after I had H-1B visa. So I was able to go.
Yeah. No, and that's another thing. Not only the money, that's a huge obstacle in terms of visas. So you would have been here on a student visa.
Yeah, F1 visa, and then I ended up switching to H-1B. Luckily, when I graduated, there were Y2K problems. You know, back in the day, the tech was considered specialty skills.
Right.
So I ended up getting a H-1B visa sponsorship through a company in New Orleans here.
Awesome. Yeah, well, I definitely want more. And I would like to talk more about that after we finish talking about your time at Tulane, because that's interesting and important. While you were at Tulane, kind of maybe what led to the work that you did after. Curious how you talked a little bit earlier about how you chose computer engineering as a major.
Yeah.
And can maybe talk about your studies a little bit. How did you find the classes when you first got here? Were they really difficult? Did you find them easier than you expected? Your experience, and I always find many schools in Kenya, even though many of them have challenges and issues with facilities and support, students are oftentimes very motivated and transition to the U.S. And obviously there's challenges and there's issues and sometimes there's problems, but usually transition and do well.
So like in high school, I graduated from Victorian, right? So that wasn't a thing. It's like I really liked the education part, and I remember classes at Tulane doing physics 1, physics 2, or even chemistry was much easier. And I was actually shocked that some of the things we did in high school was actually being taught at the university level. Despite the lack of resources we have in Kenya, I think our education system kind of digs more into practical things and understanding rather than the cramming that usually happens at the high school level here.
No, I've heard many people say that. Yeah. So you felt prepared?
Yeah, I felt way prepared, way ahead. In fact, I used to take 18 to 22 credit hours, and then you add running to that. That was quite of a challenge.
Absolutely.
I didn't have a life, but I think also coming from almost like a starvation mentality in terms of education, you can't believe you can take any course you can, and so for me it's like, wow, I can take any of these classes, and I just ended up taking a lot. So I actually finished my major in 3 years, and then I ended up taking some more classes the last year, and I have a minor in electrical engineering and mathematics.
Wow, that's interesting. And so you were really clearly interested in the sciences and the math and the engineering side.
Yes.
So I'd imagine most of your classes were in those.
Yeah, I avoided humanities as much as I can. I remember English, I think the English, whatever the last they needed, did that like the 4th year or 3rd year. Yeah, so
waited till the end.
Waited any humanities, I waited till the end. I was more prone to engineering and anything mathematics, facts kind of situation, science.
Yeah. And did Tulane have any specific facilities or labs or stuff like that you enjoyed working in, or what was that outside of the classroom, like practical kind of
Yeah,
training?
so practical is if you think even about, back in the day, coming to college, affording a desktop to use it for homework was just unheard of. It was impossible for me. I think, you're like a laptop, 500 megahertz or 400 megahertz was like 3,500 or crazy number like that.
Right.
So I didn't have any computer, but I still had to learn how to do coding. So what I ended up doing is, luckily for me, the engineering lab had a lot of access 24/7 for engineering students. So practically I lived in engineering lab, just learning how to type. Remember, I didn't know even how to type. So I spent a whole lot of time in the engineering lab, and I think actually that led me learning into Linux and Unix systems.
Right.
I will admit this, I've never used Windows. I don't use Windows at all, so I'm more like a Linux kind of guy, and that was really lack of resources kind of led me there, and it was actually almost like obstacle that ended up being very advantageous.
I was going to say, it sounds like it led you in a
it led me into
direction.
getting into the back end systems and learning and even founding a company later because of that.
So in other words, you didn't have the advantage of just getting a prepackaged programming software or even machine. You had to kind of learn how to.
A dumpster dive for my first computer.
Yeah, I remember that you said that in your article.
Yeah. Like Tulane at the end of the semester around this time, kids throw away. You might have a desktop that's only the power.
Right.
Kind of thing, situation, or even just the fan died and somebody would throw it away. So I'll pick these things and put it together.
Yeah.
So I'm proudly say I was a dumpster diver for a long time.
Yeah. Well, look, there's no shame. I used to do it when I was a student too. It's because it's amazing what people throw.
So I couldn't afford Windows, and the Windows license was like $300,
right.
And so I ended up just installing Linux, and ended up, that's the progression I ended up in.
That's interesting. No, that's a fascinating kind of progression there. Now that's what you work in that world, so that's important. And so overall, I mean, maybe you could take a step back, and I remember you said something interesting to me on our Zoom call, that your time at Tulane, both with sports as well as your studies, was a formative time in shaping your view of yourself as like a transnational person, right? Somebody who can and wants to connect with other parts of the world.
Yeah.
And I know this has to do with your business growth, which again we can talk about either now or as we go. But that period of your life, how would you say it shaped you while you were at Tulane, both as an athlete, as a student, as a person, as an adult? How would you say it formed you?
Yeah, so remember around that time, the web was coming up, right? The promise of World Wide Web was really in the inception. 98, even as a coder, you couldn't Google anything. Google was not there. Google was formed in 99, right? So you had to check out a book and all that. But I remember really buying into the idea of World Wide Web and really looking how that globalization thing gonna happen. And I think it was really something I bought in very early on. And then also being at Tulane and being exposed to professors or teachers that had almost like a global mindset, that really helped. I thought I want to do more like research in a way. When I was going to school, I thought that's the path I wanted to go to academia. But eventually I really enjoyed the tech side of things and ended up buying into it. But I think Tulane was such in a way, transformative time for me because I came at the right time at the inception of the web.
Right.
And I was able to ride that wave.
Yeah.
And then by the time I get out, of course, we had the bubble bust, the tech bubble busting in 2001 and 2001. And that was kind of scary moments. And then globalization happening thereafter. So it felt like I was just put here at the right time.
Yeah. No, it's interesting, like all those things happening, right? Like both you traveling abroad, staying abroad for an extended period of time, and then the kind of like expansion of technology and how that connects people happening at the same time. And so one other question, and this is kind of like more just of my interest.
Yeah.
Out of your time at Tulane, as a both student, athlete, maybe both, maybe there's other things. What would you say your greatest kind of memory or success or your kind of happiest experience was, your best experience, so to speak?
Yeah, I think my best experience just started feeling like I could do it. You know, having that ability, like, you know, going to class and it's like, I could do it, you know? That was really kind of like, for me, believing in myself. I think it took me to that level of like, okay, regardless of where you came from, you have that ability. And I remember that being the moment I realized that I could do way more, and it kind of led into what I do now. Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting.
You know, the difficulty, of course, you know, being away from the family, and, you know, that was quite difficult, not being able to go home as soon as I thought I would.
Yeah. Well, that was the second part of that question, is what were some of the biggest challenges or some of the hardest things? Obviously, the transition is hard. Anytime you go somewhere new, there's a transition. But once you're established, you know, you were here as a student for 4 years. What during that longer period, what was the biggest hardship?
Yeah, you know, not being able to go home often. I think that was, I consider that where was some, you know, maybe I could have done something differently. I mean, of course, now, you know, there's ways to earn money as a student athlete, to be able to transition and be able to go home. But also, you know, I think one thing I was thinking about when I got out of school, I was like, okay, I'll go work for a couple of years and then go back to graduate school. That never happened, and I consider that a failure, because it's one of those things, once you go into the workforce, it's really difficult to transition. So when I talk to younger students now, I tell them, look, we get out of school, go to graduate school right away.
It's harder to go back. It is. And then being away from family, obviously, you know, especially your daughter. How did you communicate? Did you send a lot of letters? Was it mostly phone conversation?
Yeah, the phone was not a thing. So so once in a while it would be a phone, like maybe once in a couple of months. If you make arrangements for them to go to an office,
especially your daughter is young, so
so it was mostly letters and sending pictures and getting pictures and stuff like that.
Did you keep all of that stuff?
Yes, I do. I do.
That
That's a lot of memories for that. Yeah, definitely. Absolutely. I have a whole lot of pictures from back in the day. I can still have some films. You know, like.
I'm sure those are cherished mementos.
Yes.
So maybe we can talk then about. Thank you for that, by the way. That's you know, the sports and the studies is valuable and important, but I always find the larger life, more important life things valuable to talk about. So after Tulane, you transitioned into, you said you got your H-1B visa. Is it H-1B?
H-1B,
H-1B visa. And then you were looking for work, or did you already know kind of like, did you already have a job lined up when you graduated, or did you have to go search? How did that work? How did your transition into the
I mean, around that time, you know, being a Tulane, you know, you were highly recruited. You know, I remember NASA recruited me. I ended up going to an interview, and I couldn't get through the gate because I guess they didn't realize I wasn't a U.S. citizen. So I remember that being a stumbling block also, realizing, hey, I cannot do the computer chip designs because those require security clearance. So that kind of another segue that changed my trajectory, and I ended up getting into software, and I'm thankful for that. But the company that hired me, it was like a domain registrar in New Orleans here. They recruited me from Tulane. So by the time I graduated, actually, I already had the job.
So you worked here in New Orleans when you finished?
Yes, I worked in New Orleans. But my background was really founding companies. I've always wanted to do that since I was 9 years old. My dad, we had a kiosk in the village, so we go to Kapsabet, we buy things in bulk, we subdivide them, we sell them in the village. So I kind of raised in that kind of entrepreneurial family. And I remember around the age of 9, I knew that's what I wanted to do. So I've had only one employer in my life ever. So that job from college to get H-1B, by the time Katrina hit in 2005, I had my green card, and I founded my own company, and I've continued that way since.
And this was Enhanced Soft?
Yes, so Enhanced Service kind of came later, but I founded a software called OS Ticket, which is a ticketing system, which is kind of open source software. I'm a big fan of open source software from my Linux experience.
Right, yeah.
And all that.
Yeah. I'm not a tech person, so I kind of know what you're talking about, but I see the connection for sure. So yeah, maybe you can talk. So you graduated Tulane, you get a job here in New Orleans, and then Katrina.
Yes.
2004 or 2005.
2005. Yeah, right? August 5th.
I know. I mean, I was actually here. I had just graduated myself, and it was. I mean, everything in New Orleans changed.
Yeah.
Is that how you ended up in Alexandria?
Yes, that's how I ended up in Alexandria, and it's one of those like pivotal moments, right? I remember Katrina happening. I lived in West Bank, side of New Orleans, and initially we weren't gonna evacuate. And the more we saw it, it became an issue. So evacuating from New Orleans to Alexandria took 8 hours, which is a 3-hour drive. It was kind of scary moment, and came back for a year, but everything was different.
Yeah.
All the friends we had, neighborhoods were completely different.
Yeah.
So decided to move to Alexandria temporarily, and 20 years later, I'm still there.
Yeah. No, I've had those experiences.
Yeah, but one thing about Katrina that that happening kind of forced me to say, you have to pursue your own thing. And so that's when I ended up quitting my job and doing my own thing.
Yeah. No, it is. Katrina, for anybody to live through it, is oftentimes a point of transition, right? Whether sometimes not necessarily good.
For the good or for the bad.
But sometimes, it is a kind of jumping off point. And so why Alexandria? Like, why did you evacuate to Alexandria?
So my ex-wife is from Alexandria, so I ended up evacuating there, and it was supposed to be a temporary thing, and we ended up staying there, and I ended up just staying there because kids situation, and for me also, I'm not a big city kind of person, coming from the village route kind of situation. So small town is okay for me, as long as I'm able to travel.
Right. Yeah. No, that's interesting. Yeah. And that's actually brings up something I wanted to ask in your time at Tulane. So your ex-wife, is she American? She's from here?
Yes.
Did you meet at Tulane, you and her? Or?
We met in New Orleans, but she went to LSU, Shreveport. She used to work at a children's hospital. Okay. That's how we met after I graduated.
Okay. Yeah. So you and her met after you finished when you were working here. Yeah. And maybe we can backtrack and just because I forgot to ask this question, what was your social life like? Both at Tulane and then also after?
Oh, non-existent for sure.
Yeah.
I don't remember.
22 hours of classes plus running is.
Plus running was that. I don't remember even having a drink until like way later in life. Yeah. It wasn't that kind of thing. Of course, New Orleans is. Sometimes I regret that because New Orleans was like a party city.
It is.
And I didn't get an opportunity to really exploit that in a way. But I'm thankful for the experience I had. Yeah. So of course, there's a whole lot of micro experiences you ended up getting the college level. I think one of the biggest thing for me transitioning to United States was I wasn't aware of things even like racism existed. There I was like valedictorian, I think I'm smart, and I think there's also this concept of because you're a student athlete, if you go to a class, a professor or even the fellow people in the class will think you're not as smart because you're an athlete, because you're a scholarship thing. And I think that's something we really have to dispel a lot. Yeah. And for me, even if I recruit now and hire, if somebody has some collegiate experience, I see that as a plus because they had to do different things and work hard on those. So that was kind of another micro situation, that transitioning to United States.
And that's what I wanted to ask about that in general. Did you, when you were at Tulane or after, did you experience any racism, any kind of anti-African sentiment, any sort of those kind of classic stereotypes that a lot of Americans have about Africans in general? You mentioned earlier that there's this perception that, you come from Kenya, it must be hot there.
Yeah.
Not the part that I come from, right?
Yeah.
I know other people will say they get asked questions of like, do you see lions? I'm like, unless you go to the zoo.
So we ended up, the Kenyan group here will just tell people here, we have pet lions, just to leave us alone, that kind of situation. but you know that's kind of the classic experience, right? And I think for most of us coming to this country, we have an escape mechanism. It's just like you don't know any better, and we tend to just kind of ignore that. Yeah, so you know, I had a couple of experiences. Of course, like doing engineering, you're probably the only black student in engineering class.
Right.
I remember the first set of classes, you had to form groups. You don't get picked into a group because people assume they don't know your capabilities or whatever, you know, stereotypes people have. I remember that being very hurtful in a way.
Yeah.
But for me, I've always felt like, you know, I have to, like 6 phrase word I usually use, go extra mile, which is ties into running, and pixels don't care, or rather computers don't care.
Yeah, interesting.
That kind of thing.
Yeah. No, it's and it's interesting. Go the extra mile. And pixels don't care. Like those are the running and the computer studies.
Yeah.
Where your two kind of like passions, you know, commitments, and the fact that those define not just those things, those phrases define like your
yeah.
you.
And I encourage everybody to kind of compress their life and come up with like a 6-word phrase that really define them, because, you know, I find that motivating for me. You know,
no, for sure.
It's something I go back to all the time.
Yeah, no, it can be a helpful thing.
Yeah.
So then Katrina happens. You've end up that kind of propels you to Alexandria, where you found OS Ticket, and then that grows into Enhanced Soft over the course of the last 2 decades, essentially. Maybe can you talk about that process of building your own business? You seem to view yourself as an entrepreneur. You've always said that a couple times, right? So what was that experience like? Building a business in a small town in a state that's kind of like on the outskirts in the U.S. and that kind of stuff.
So remember, you know, having this experience of buying into web, at the very early on, around 2003, 2005, like I think I had a conversation with you on Zoom and talk about Thomas Friedman book. The World is Flat. And that was like really an eye-opener for me. And I ended up like structuring everything I do to be location agnostic. You'd be surprised. I've lived in Alexandria now almost 20 years. I don't have a single client in Alexandria. And we have clients in about 121 countries right now. Right? So for me, location has never really mattered in a way. So everything I've done or what I do now in life is really based on global citizenship, you know, in a way. And
global citizenship?
In terms of, having this idea of like, you know, the world is the market. It's not a specific location. You know, let's say if you're in Alexandria, for example, what I found out about small towns, which is almost like the micro sense of the village, is
true.
If people don't know your last name or they don't know the church you go to, it's a problem, like that kind of thing. So for me, I think I ended up just compressing that and kind of having the village experience, and Alexandria is just like, okay, everything else I'm going to do is going to be beyond my location.
Right. Yeah. No, that's interesting. That's fascinating.
So in terms of seeing myself as an entrepreneur in a way, I think I would say I'll credit that to my dad. You know, just seeing him build businesses and being able to marry the sense of business and community together. If you think about OS Ticket is an open source ticketing system.
Right.
So this is a software I wrote in around 2003. I still had a job after work. In the evening, I'll be writing my own thing. Put it out in 2004.
Right.
And it went viral. To a point by 2005, I was doing consulting enough to be able to make a living.
Right.
And I continued that transition until I formed Enhanced Soft. I also have Rotich Foundation. I also have Rotich Group, another company. And I also have Rotich Properties.
Okay.
So those are the kind of things I like kind of forming businesses.
So you do some real estate with Rotich Properties.
Yes.
Rotich Group is...
It's kind of an umbrella company that owns the rest.
The others.
Yeah.
And then Enhanced Soft is essentially the support system for OS Ticket. And then, so can you maybe tell me a little bit about the Rotich Foundation? Yeah.
So for me, I always think back about how many of me are stuck there. And we spoke earlier about the importance of scaffolding the public schools system. So what I ended up doing is picking for school in my sub-location, which is Kamuba sub-location.
schools?
Yeah, there are 4 primary schools there. And being able to say if you get certain grade, kind of merit-based scholarship, you don't get an application form, you get an acceptance form. And you just have to sign and accept scholarship. So we have 8 kids now, they got 4-year scholarship to study in high school.
So you're providing funding for them to pay their high school tuition.
Yes, as you know, like Kenya, it can be substantial amount of money for parents there to pay for high school. So I decided to provide that. Besides that, also mentorships, providing kind of a flywheel kind of thing that these students we sponsor also come back and mentor their other students, younger students. You think even things like sanitary pads become a big issue.
Right.
Mental health is not something that's looked at as a problem.
Right.
And that's, I think, these kids get exposed to the world, they need that.
Yeah.
So that's kind of my journey for Rotich Foundation. Still at the infancy level,
Right.
but that's really the goal.
Interesting. And how long has it been?
It's been about a year now doing that, but I've been doing feed situation, helping the village for the longest 20 years
Probably
or so.
since you left,
Yeah.
in ways you can.
Yeah.
And so the students that the Rotich Foundation funds, they're all public, it's all government schools.
Yes. I'm a big believer. In fact,
right.
even to qualify for the scholarship, you have to be in the 4 schools that are picked as kind of test case. We're going to expand over the time. As funding becomes, we improve our funding.
Right.
But for the most part, it's a private foundation. I don't seek any public funding in a way. So totally just me and my company's family.
So that's how you fund it, is through your company and your own kind of maybe. Do you do any fundraising with?
No. So private foundations, we don't raise money externally. Yeah.
Interesting. And so maybe I'd like a follow-up question on like why, just aside from just your belief in public schools, which I think is interesting and important, because a lot of times when people I talk to a lot of runners who come to the U.S., they have their careers as students, and then many of them stay for a longer period of time. And then they either, if they go back, or if they stay in the U.S. but they have connections, they go back, and one of the things they do is build a school.
Yeah.
A lot of times it's a private school.
Yeah.
And usually their interest is both, they'll have scholarships for some students, but then most students pay fees. You've gone in a different direction.
Yeah.
Outside of you believing in public schools because that was your experience, why that specific choice? Like, why not go back and build a school? Why not provide funds for students to go to university? I'm not saying you should do that. I'm curious. That's a choice that I haven't heard of many people making for public education.
Yeah, so I think most people, it would be easier for me to go start from scratch and have a school and control everything. And I understand that people want they want to be able to hire the teachers, they want to provide an environment that makes sense. But for me, I think about the rest. What about the rest of them? What about people who are not able to afford or actually get an opportunity, even if they have some form of scholarship? So it's not a criticism in any way, but for me, I feel like public schools, we gotta provide the scaffolding and provide assistance for these students in that environment. And I think that's gonna be the biggest impact. I look at the impact level, right? I can either have a private school and support X students who can afford it, or be able to support many schools by just providing assistance around what they have already. Yeah.
Is there a sports component to what you do or want to do, or is it just simply students, good grades, you get a scholarship?
For now, it's been good grades, and one thing that you find a lot, even in Kenya, is who you know for a lot of things. And I've always felt like we gotta start slowly chipping away and changing that and having this mentality of merit-based thinking. So I wanted to start with purely merit-based thing. And of course, if you think even about athletics, it's purely merit. You can't know somebody and go to Olympics, right?
It should be.
It should be. I mean, there could be selection issues that knowing somebody, but I think athletics is the most fairest merit thing.
There's a merit is a core part
It's
of
a
what
core
sports
part
is
of
supposed
what
to be.
sports, yeah. And I want to bring that, and I think that's something we should focus more on. I have one student I'm sponsoring now in Jeff Saita. I don't know if you heard of Jeff Saita. They have like this cross country meet now. Jeff Saita High School. I have one student going to Tessa Land, and I was able. This student, brilliant runner, and so I was able to get him to Jeff Saita High School. So he's boarding now and training, and I do full sponsorship for him there.
So it's not that sports is a focus, but if there are talented athletes, then
and it's also, I think Jeff Saita is more coming now, almost like St. Patrick kind of setup.
I've heard the name.
It's a big cross country meet that happens every year.
No, that's great. And so maybe the second to last question, in our previous conversation, you had mentioned that you are planning, I know you're going back this summer, but you are also planning to move back to Eldoret or somewhere around Eldoret. You'll be based there. This is both for your businesses, but also the foundation. And I assume also like reconnecting, maybe personally. Curious, like, why do you want to, 20 years or more than 20 years, 25 years after you've come over, built a life here, built a family here, built a business, what's the motivation to go back and kind of reconnect in Kenya?
Yeah, so it get a little bit emotional for me because I think sometimes you chase something so hard and you get to that end and it's not fulfilling as much as you thought, right? I've been in this country almost a quarter of a century. That's a long time to be somewhere and not feel at home. Because there's a sense now, like I don't feel the belonging here. I go home, I don't feel the belonging. So you're kind of a lost soul in between.
In between. You don't feel at home there, you don't feel at home here.
And I think several times I've been home and felt that tug to say I can do more here, and for what I do, it does not matter. Again, it's location agnostic. So I've decided to form a team in Eldoret. So I have a branch of the company, and hence I'm in Eldoret now. I have 6 employees. I'm onboarding a few more this year. So I'm going to build a team there, and I think also it bring back the community thing. Also, not only am I bringing jobs there, I'm able to get these kids who are lucky enough to join my company to work for a global company and for them to realize also they can be the makers. So that's been a theme for me. How can I connect the business with the community?
Seems, you've said that several times, so that seems to be a big
like I tend to run into intersection of technology and culture. And those are the kind of intersections that really interest me.
Interesting. No, that's fascinating. And then I'd like maybe to dig a little deeper into what you mentioned about when you go abroad and you stay somewhere for a long period of time, but you're not from there. No matter how much, I've had this experience where no matter how much you become ingratiated into the community, you meet people, you live somewhere, you learn about it, you're still not from there. But then you're also spend so long of a period of time away from where you come from that you kind of get disconnected. This liminal space. How have you managed that in over the course of the last 25 years of being away from home, but also this being your home for so long? Like how have you balanced that?
So I'm a creature of habit, right? Like if you think about it, I moved to Louisiana, I never left Louisiana, right? So I don't like a lot of change. When I'm comfortable, I'm comfortable. So, trying to reconcile that is really difficult as you get older, especially for me. I came here, my parents were still young. Now my dad is up in age, struggling a little bit with dementia, and you feel that lost moments that's happened over time, right? Despite the success or whatever you've had in your journey, that belonging is still something really important. And I think for me, I've had the tug all these years that it's time. And also, the world is changing fast enough, not to take think badly of the United States, but you also have school banning books. You have this a lot of transition, political climate changing, things about in general, a lot of things in changing in the world, and sometimes you that belonging start being louder and louder. And and I think for me it's just falling in love where I was born. I'm not quite a religious person, but it gets to a point that I was born there for a reason.
No, we all come from somewhere. And sometimes it does take leaving a place to really connect with it.
To appreciate it. I think it's losing to appreciate is one of those things.
And a question that is related. So you said after you got your H-1B visa, you got a green card. Are you a citizen?
I've been a U.S. citizen. I've been a U.S. citizen for a while. So
Does that make it not easier, but does that give you a little more sense of security to be able to go back? Because then you can come back to the U.S. Like, I know people who have stayed in the U.S., Kenyans, as runners, and then for training, and then once they got their citizenship, then they moved back to Kenya because they'd rather be in Kenya, but they didn't want to leave because they just didn't want to make sure they could come back.
So I think sometimes it's not even the fact that they have to get citizenship to leave. If you are if you have a green card, one of the rules with the green card says you have to be here once a year.
Right.
You can't be outside the country. So that's kind of really tying you. I think even people with green card, they will more likely prefer to maybe even move faster. So that citizenship is a motivator not to have that thing like you have to be back yearly. So for me, I'm spending about 6 months a year now in Kenya, and I'm going to slowly transition away to being there full time. But I also consider Louisiana home. It's strange. Like I come to New Orleans and I feel at home compared to Alexandria even.
Of course.
So there's this kind of duality to it. But it's life. It's kind of really interesting.
It is, and it's part of being an international person. You know, it's like that kind of both connection but also distance. You touched on it briefly, and again, I know it can be sensitive for people, but we are at a moment in the United States where there is a huge push to either get people from other countries to leave or make them feel uncomfortable enough to where they leave. And you clearly are feeling that a little bit at least.
Absolutely.
How has that affected your view of, say, making a life here, or even the United States? Even though you're a citizen, that provides you with some security, but you're also Kenyan, right? You're also came here, as an immigrant. What's your I know this is sensitive, so I don't want to put you on the spot.
I don't think it's as sensitive. I think these are things that we have to speak on. Right?
I agree. That's why
we don't speak in the moments, it's become one of those things like the pulses is some people are hard to speak on, but I don't think it's a problem for me because I think I'm living through that moment and I've been able to see that clearly, the transition of that. I mean, the brilliance of United States was to suck up the knowledge from the rest of the world. The brilliance from different countries, people are really the best of the best, the cream of the crop there, come to United States to go to college. Like myself, I've employed Americans for the last 15 years, right? So what does that mean when I feel like even students in F1 think I don't mind how many cancellation fees has happened. What does that mean? That if it didn't happen at that time when I was in school, how life would be different for me. I'm definitely appreciative of the country, but I think you can see the transition into nepotism going on. One of the things that really bothers me also is the brain drain that's coming out of Africa. I mean, people talk about oil being a resource. I think human resource is the next thing, and where the human resource is in Africa. And I really feel like we should have that stamp of brain drain leaving the country. You know, the best of the doctors, nurses, for example, they leave the country to come to different. I mean, it's good to find a living, to be able to make a living, but there should be something to be done. And I felt like there's that responsibility for me that I could do something. Being in tech, I could hire people there. You know, I could pay them really well. You know, so the country is it's a little bit difficult, for some people to put that touch in terms of what's going on.
Right.
But I think this is a transition we're seeing worldwide.
Yeah.
Even in Kenya, we've had a lot of youth, having issues because there are no jobs,
Yeah.
right?
It's big protests.
Yeah, protests and all that. So the question is, what are national governments going to do?
Right.
Those are the conversation I think we should have,
Yeah.
and we shouldn't shy away from having those conversations.
Yeah, I agree. So I appreciate you answering the question. I'm always a little sensitive because I don't want to put people on the spot if they don't want to talk about it. So I appreciate your willingness. The last question that I always try to end with is basically, we've talked about a lot.
Yeah.
I think we've been going now for about an hour and 20 minutes. So it's been a great conversation.
Yeah.
Is there anything that you'd like to kind of say or mention about either your running career, your career as a student, your post, college career, business, maybe the plans you have for the future, anything that you would like, to get on record, so to speak, right? I mean, this is an interview dedicated to charting your experience, but also your views on your experience.
Yeah.
Anything that you'd like to add to finish up with?
Yeah. So like in Kalenjin, at the tribe I belong, we have these age sets, right? We have the 7 age sets, and usually if you add up the time about 80 years, that there's a reset. And I would say, even to touch on the politics thing, I think you're seeing that cycle of reset happening now. It's kind of related to that. We also have had cycle of technology happening. I was lucky enough to get here when tech was taking off in terms of World Wide Web. I think we're at the inception of the greatest technological moment ever now with AI. And I think I don't think people appreciate that enough. I feel like I've lived 3 lives at the same time. I'm somebody who grew up in the village, used outhouse,
Right.
no electricity, no running water, came at that moment of web and believed in web. And now I see AI that's come about.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
And, also it's going to cause a lot of problems because a lot of jobs going to go away. So I think one thing I said, what I would tell anybody young is, you better appreciate this moment and really be part of this movement that's going to happen.
Yeah.
And I don't think there's any choice. I think the biological intelligence is kind of merging with non-biological intelligence at this point. I'll challenge anybody, throw away your computer, throw away your phone, and see how empty you're gonna be. And so we really don't have any option but to embrace what's going on. But also excellence is like, you can go to the village and connect and have that connection going on. So there's that duality, we can't get away from it. Yeah.
No, I think you're right. There's many things to say about that. But I think that advice is probably good advice.
Yeah.
So I think we'll stop there.
Okay.